Hi guys, Reigning Spider-Man here, and today we're going to talk about something special. Something that was given to us in the late 90s by our fallen video game company, Sega. I loved Sega. Sure, they made a lot of really solid fuck-ups in the past, but they also gave us a lot of really awesome experiences. These days, Sega really sucks, but back in the day, they were the only ones able to go head-to-head with Nintendo before Sony's PlayStation and a series of poor business decisions ultimately forced the company to go third-party. There were many reasons why Sega failed. The 32X, the Sega CD, the Saturn, and their lack of brand recognition. Many people can go off and name a lot of great Nintendo first-party titles, but most people can't do that with Sega. They usually get to Sonic and then draw a blank. Not to say that Sega didn't match Nintendo on great franchises, because they did. You just didn't hear about them. They were able to match Nintendo on almost everything. From platformers like Rystar to RPGs like Shining Force, Sega had us covered. There is one franchise that Sega released that is almost forgotten about these days, and that would be the Panzer Dragoon series. These games were rail shooters that took place in a post-apocalyptic world where the survivors would war over the ruins from an ancient age that hold the power to either control or destroy the land. They were known for their fun gameplay, great stories, and unique art style. The series took a lot of artistic influence from Ottoman Turkish cultures and especially from the Arzak comics. They even got the series creator, Jean Girard, to design the Japanese cover art for the first game. What ultimately resulted was an artistically driven and thematic series. These games were definitely impressive, but I'll be honest, the arcade-style gameplay really doesn't seem to fit them. These games are so focused on the presentation and style that it seems out of place to have the player focus on scores and mashing the fire button. By no means are they bad games, quite the opposite, but this is the type of world I really want to explore and take in. I want to go on an adventure in this world. Thankfully, one installment in the series offers this, and that would be the beloved and highly desired third installment, Panzer Dragoon Saga. Holy shit, was this different. This game was not a rail shooter like the other games, it's an RPG, and like this series' art style, it's a very unique RPG. It's not a game that's about a group of characters meeting up to save the world. It's about one person's quest for vengeance throughout an already destroyed world. It carries a lot of themes about loss, humanity, and uncertainty, and it's fucking great. But how does this game hold up today? Is it really this amazing masterpiece people say it is? Well, let's examine it and find out. Let's take a look at Panzer Dragoon Saga. The story of the game goes like this. Edge is a young mercenary working for the tyrannical empire at an ancient excavation site. The workers have no idea what they are looking for but continue on with their jobs. When the cave is attacked by a monster, Edge finds what appears to be a young woman asleep within the walls. After defeating the monster, Edge's companions and captain are killed by the Black Fleet, a group of Imperial soldiers that decided to rebel against the Empire for control of the world. They are led by a man known as Kramen, who orders the attack and also steals the sleeping woman from the cave for unknown purposes. After Edge is shot down a mining shaft, he is revived by a mysterious light only to be attacked by more monsters. This time, however, he is saved by a dragon who shares a connection and destiny with him. Together, the two of them team up as Edge embarks on a quest of vengeance against Kramen, who now has the young girl Azel working under him. That's the spoiler-free premise of the game. The story itself offers a lot of twists and turns and makes things become far less black and white as the game progresses. I like that this game has the rebellion as one of the villains. I think since Star Wars, a lot of people will assume that any rebellion against an evil empire are the good guys. This game comes in to remind us not to white knight every rebellion we see, as this one certainly isn't portrayed in a positive light. The game's story flows quite nicely and it tackles a lot of themes: anger, confusion, sorrow, and even exploring humanity. It's not an uplifting story. It has uplifting moments and you meet a variety of characters along the way, but that doesn't make this a happy game. Sometimes it just feels like an empty quest. This becomes very apparent towards the end of Disc 3. Without giving it away, we're put in a position where we don't know who our true enemy is or what we're fighting for. It throws you for a wonderful twist and keeps it going till the end. It's great. With that said, however, the story is not perfect. There are a lot of things that could have been explained better. More exposition would have been helpful to keep up with certain aspects of the story. It's possible this could be due to console limitations, but a casual gamer may get lost, especially if this is their first dive into the series. Not that this game is that strongly tied into the previous two, but it definitely would be easier to follow for those who did play the first two. It also doesn't help that the way text is presented in this game is kind of choppy. The text appears at the bottom of the screen as the characters speak, and you really need to make sure you read everything, as they will continue to speak whether you are ready or not. This isn't really a problem to Japanese players, as the voice acting itself is Japanese, but to Western viewers, you really need to pay attention. There also seems to be a bit of a pacing issue. I feel that a lot of story elements at the end of Disc 3 and all of Disc 4 could have come sooner, like maybe the beginning of Disc 3, because of the radical shift in plot and focus. I'll go into that more in the character section, but with those problems aside, the story really is an enjoyable and thought-provoking adventure that leaves an impression on you. You may not follow everything perfectly, but you will always be eager to see what happens next. The cast of Panzer Dragoon Saga is small for an RPG. You meet a few standout characters along the way, but your only playable characters are Edge and the Dragon. I don't really have a problem with this though. Sure, it would be nice to have a party of characters to play as, but this game is not a conventional RPG, nor is it from an established RPG series. The benefits to this are that we focus almost solely on Edge throughout his journey. Well, then he better be a good protagonist.
Good news, everyone!
He is. Edge is a great lead. His need for vengeance predates that of Ryo Hazuki, and his determination and willpower are what drives the game. With that said, however, it's not like he's some sort of self-centered asshole. When he's not on a mission for revenge, he's helping various people in different situations. Sometimes for his own gain, but mostly just because he's a good person. Sometimes he loses himself in his anger and his confusion, but he never becomes a brooding emo fuck. He still has optimism even in the darkest times. It's hard not to like Edge. Sure, he's not a badass wielding a 6-foot-tall Buster Sword, but he's an underdog who's badass in his own way. Edge rides the dragon throughout the whole game. The dragon is kind of a blank slate. It has no real personality, which is a bit disappointing. I would have liked to see Edge and the dragon bond and grow closer as the game progresses. Something kind of like How to Train Your Dragon, but I guess that's not what the developers wanted to do. It seems like they wanted it to be more like Edge and the dragon were two parts of the same entity. I guess it makes sense at the end of the game, but I still feel a little bit more could have been done with it. The dragon is a major driving force of the story, but he's more of a tool for the characters rather than a character itself. A bit disappointing, but by no means a deal breaker, especially since there is another person in this game who is both a tool and a character, and that would be Azel. Azel is an interesting and compelling character. Though she appears human, she is actually more closely related to the monsters you fight throughout the game. She is a drone created by the ancients to interact with the towers that hold the power to control the monsters throughout the world. Because of this, she is a highly desired weapon by the Empire and the Black Fleet. The game starts off with her being fiercely loyal to Kramen for waking her and giving her a purpose. Edge sees that she is being used by everyone and wants to help her, but her loyalty is unshaken. Throughout the game, you learn more and more about her. The best parts of the story is when it focuses on Azel. It gives us a chance to watch her learn about emotions, learn about people, and ultimately what it means to be human. Her confusion and naivety in dark times of war make you really sympathize with everything she is going through. You never get to play as her, which sucks. My biggest problem with Azel is that I feel she is underused. I wanted more of her. I think her and Edge's joining up could have come at the beginning of Disc 3 rather than Disc 4. I would have loved to see more character development between the two of them, especially with some things Azel says towards the end of the game. It's not like I couldn't see why they would be that way, I just think it could have been fleshed out more, but Azel does her job. She gives you a very iconic feel of the game with her unique design and is one of the most memorable things about it. The last character I'm going to focus on is the villain Kramen. When you first see him in the beginning of the game, it seems like he is going to be just the stock, evil bad guy bent on ruling the world, but you learn that despite his views being very warped and twisted, he does have the world's best interests in mind. He is concerned with the future of humanity and its survival and genuinely wants to save it. What makes him our villain are his brutal tactics and his dated ideals. He doesn't really come off like a horrible person. He comes off more as someone who has lost themselves in their own frustration and lust for change, but it does make him a more sympathetic villain than you would expect. However, like Azel, I wish he was more involved in the game's story. He is a major driving force of it, but he's not as present as I would like him to be. And considering what is done with him within the story, I see no reason why he couldn't appear more, but he is still another compelling character that you love to hate. Those are all of the major characters, and overall, they make for an interesting and one-of-a-kind cast. I wish some of them were fleshed out more though. I understand all of their motivation, but would have liked to see some further exploring of their emotions. But even then, we are still left with an enjoyable roster, and that's exactly what you would want on your adventure. Gameplay is divided into three main sections. There's flying mode, which is the mode used to explore the various areas and levels throughout the game. There's walking mode, which is where we control Edge on foot throughout small villages, and battle mode, where we combat enemies throughout our journey. Let's start off with flying mode. It's pretty basic. You control Edge and his dragon going through numerous areas to solve puzzles. Almost every level has some kind of puzzle in it to solve. It may sound like it gets tedious, but it really doesn't. It's not exciting, but it does give the game its own feel. Most RPGs stick with characters on foot throughout almost the entire game. This one has you on the dragon most of the game, and given how much of the game is played this way, it makes sense why this was done. It's not for everyone though. If you're someone who doesn't like puzzles and likes fast gameplay, then this game definitely isn't for you. The gameplay moves at a slower pace, but considering how much faster the plot progresses, I guess it balances out. Although there are some oddities to it, like this roll move the dragon can do when you hit R. I never once found a reason to use it. This mode and the walking mode both use this aiming reticle to examine and interact with objects throughout the entire game. You bring it up by hitting A, and then when you find the object you want to interact with, you hit A again. This is probably one of the stranger aspects of this game, and you would think that this would get annoying rather quickly, but it honestly doesn't. You get used to it almost immediately, and given how it was implemented, I'm shocked no one ever tried to make this a PC game. It would work perfectly for a mouse, but regardless, it works just fine for this and the walking mode. Let's get into the walking mode now. This is where Edge is on foot, and it plays kind of like you would expect. You go in towns and villages, use the aiming reticle to interact with people, and that's kind of it. This is probably the mode you will play the least. It's not pointless though, as it does help break away from the dragon related stuff and gives the player a second to relax and catch their footing. Not much to say about this mode since the controls are very simple. If I had to nitpick, I would complain about the whole aspect of holding a button to run. I hate when games do that, but otherwise it's fine. The real heart of this game lies in its one-of-a-kind battle system. This game uses random encounters, which aren't popular with a lot of people, but it really balances out here because they are not very frequent and you get more experience out of them than you would think. Most RPGs would make you go through about 20 battles to get from one level to the next. This game often feels like you only have to do about 5, sometimes less. It works out perfectly. It's never tedious, especially because this game has a damn good battle system. It's a very interesting style of combat. It's a mix of classic turn-based combat and real-time positioning. So the way it works is that you attack with either Edge or the dragon. Edge uses a gun that focuses all damage to a specific point on the monster, and the dragon uses scatter shots to attack multiple enemies at once or multiple parts of the same enemy. You press A for Edge, B for the dragon's laser, or C for the combat menu to use items and do other things that we'll discuss in just a moment. You are able to attack when these gauges in the bottom right are filled. More filled gauges allows for more costly actions. You are able to move your dragon around the enemy in a 360-degree manner. Each side of the monster can have different effects, and they are represented in this little radar below the action. Green areas are safe zones where you won't take any damage from the enemy. Clear areas means you are at risk for weak attacks, and the red areas mean you are at risk for stronger attacks. Changing positions allows you to scope out a weak point on the enemy to have Edge shoot for bonus damage, but it doesn't stop there. Some monsters are immune to Edge's attacks, while others are immune to the dragon's attacks, and some monsters have no weak points at all. But you aren't restricted to just these forms of attack. The dragon can also cast spells known as berserks. These consume BP and 1 to 2 gauges. They can inflict magic damage or physical damage. You can also heal yourself or give yourself buffs to make your battles easier. One of the most impressive parts of this game is the dragon morphing system. This allows you to adjust your dragon stats depending on your situation. Is the enemy too strong and only takes physical damage? Well, you can morph your dragon into an attack tank. Need to be quick to cast spells? Well, you can morph your dragon into an assault mage. It really makes up for the lack of other party members. Being able to try all these different combinations of the dragon is just a blast. It's just as awesome seeing your dragon physically change forms and colors depending on his stats. The dragon evolves throughout the story, making his transformations more and more extreme and even stronger. I love it. Each class has a trade-off, and no matter what, your dragon's class will be categorized by whatever their dominant stat is. This will unlock full gauge spells that consume 3 gauges but no BP to buff your dragon's applicable attributes. You can morph your dragon during battle for 1 gauge or at the menu, so it's never really inconvenient. It really is a well-balanced and fun combat system. Overall, the gameplay of Panzer Dragoon Saga is good, but it's made great because of this wonderful battle system. In most games, fights just get boring. Not here. These are fun and exciting till the very end. This game has a very interesting soundtrack. It's a very dark soundtrack. There are a lot of different elements. First of all, almost every single track incorporates Japanese taiko drums in some way. They are often mixed with different styles of music, ranging from dark, grungy techno sounds to Egyptian to soothing Japanese violins and sometimes even mixing them. The soundtrack is excellent and complements the dark, gritty nature of the plot. With that said, I do think the taiko drums are a bit overused. Not that they're bad, but I hear them a bit too often for my taste. I also feel like more tonal variation in the soundtrack would have benefited. Most of the tracks in this game are heavy, angsty, grungy, dark. I think some lighter tracks would have helped even it out. Not that there isn't any, there are definitely some lighter tracks like the town music, but I think some more would have been welcome. This game was composed by Saori Kobayashi and Mariko Nanba, who both had a track record of composing music for far less gritty games, so you'd think they would be able to deliver on a few lighter tracks for other towns or moments, but given this game's world, I guess I could see why they would be rather limited. With that said though, it is impressive to see them tackle a much darker style and come out of it with solid work. This is an excellent soundtrack for this game. The standout tracks in it are unforgettable. Sure, it could have used more variation, but I'm pretty happy with what I got. Now, this will probably be the most negative part of this review. The world in Panzer Dragoon Saga is a bit disappointing. It's not like I was expecting some big open landscape like in Zelda or something. Basically, the way that it works is that you pick your destination from this mini-map. That's fine. My biggest problem with this is the lack of towns and villages. There are only 2 small villages and 1 actual town. That's it. That kind of sucks. One of my favorite things to do in RPGs is interact with the NPCs because they help flesh out the world and offer more information. It's not like the ones in here don't do that, they do, but I want more of it. I understand this is a post-apocalyptic wasteland, so maybe the world isn't hugely populated, but this just feels lifeless. I guess I understand why they did this. This game really pushes the Saturn to its limits. The Saturn was supposed to be focused on 2D games. This game is full of voice acting, full motion video, and tons of fully rendered 3D areas. It probably would have been impossible to add more locations. The limitations are more apparent with the game's overall blockiness, poor draw distance, and heavy use of dark colors. The dark colors aren't so bad as they feed into the style and tone of the game. With my problems aside though, this world is still incredibly imaginative and gorgeous on the Saturn. The FMVs look fantastic and the world itself tackles many different types of landscapes. Deserts, oceans, mountains, forests, and lots of science fiction elements. All of them look great. The style of this game's technology is prevalent throughout the whole thing and it's awesome, but I'll be honest, because of the blocky draw distance of the Saturn and the uniqueness of these designs, sometimes it's hard to make out what I'm looking at, but even then, you can still feel every bit of creativity that went into making this world. Another minor complaint I have is the lack of inns. If you want to save in this game, you have to go to the camp or to a level with the save point. Minor, but it gets a little annoying. But, like I said, small problem. So the actual world of Panzer Dragoon Saga can maybe be seen as a style over substance sort of thing, but I think that's a little harsh. I feel if this game had more of an interactive life to its world, I would have no issue. What pulls it through is the execution and the creativity of the world itself, and that is still a huge plus. Overall, Panzer Dragoon Saga is a fantastic adventure with hours of unique gameplay, but I do wish it came out on the Dreamcast instead of the Saturn, as the game sometimes feels limited by its own platform. It's clear the developers had grander visions in mind but were handicapped by their hardware, but even with that issue, it is still probably the best game on the Sega Saturn. The Saturn needed RPGs, and it just so happens that this one may be one of the best, plus the Dreamcast gave us Skies of Arcadia, so I guess they both win. Panzer Dragoon Saga is said to be one of the greatest RPGs of all time and better than Final Fantasy VII. Do I agree with this? Honestly, no. While I do think Panzer Dragoon Saga is an amazing game, it came out a year after 7 and did far less to innovate the industry. Final Fantasy VII also offered a more massive world, more detailed story, and more developed characters. I can't in good conscience look at these objectively and deem Panzer Dragoon Saga better. Now, if you prefer it to Final Fantasy VII, hey, have at it, it's your opinion, and they are both great games. I would tell you to pick up a copy, but here's where we run into issues. Panzer Dragoon Saga is currently valued at over $500 US and is a desired collector's piece, so it's very difficult to get your hands on an actual copy of the game. So why am I even doing this review at all for a game that no one can play? Well, I actually did a video not that long ago detailing exactly how to play the game for way cheaper than it is online, and it's not emulation. It's playing it on the Saturn like it was meant to be played. Check out that video if you're interested. I would definitely tell you to do it. This is worth all the effort. For when it came out, Panzer Dragoon Saga is easily a 10 out of 10 game. Unfortunately, it hasn't aged as gracefully as games like Ocarina of Time, but even by modern standards, the style, the creativity, and the story help it stand out to this day, which is why I proudly award this game an 8 out of 10. I'm Raining Spider-Man, thank you guys for watching.